All right, I fully expect that most people won't watch this video, and those who actually make it all the way through won't share it because what I'm about to say doesn't align with the popular perception of today's unfolding and essentially startling reality. While there are many people out there that may not view AI technology as very important or impactful or even relevant to humanity, with each passing day, artificial intelligence is inching its way, if not in a full-on sprint, toward heavily influencing and even replacing the so-called problematic human element. Today, there's a section of humanity who don't appear to be working in the best interest of popularizing the truth. They seem to have developed an algorithmic mental funnel with AI chatbots like ChatGPT. These chatbots, as they're called, look like they have a pre-programmed narrative that's steering human cattle down a particular chute of thinking. Now, we've discussed this in other recent videos, and if you missed them, I really encourage you to click on the tabs and links to check them out. But real quick, ChatGPT was created, funded, and launched by the likes of Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and Microsoft back in 2015. The GPT part stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which refers to how ChatGPT processes requests and formulates responses. ChatGPT is basically trained with reinforcement learning through human feedback and rewards models that rank the best responses. This feedback helps augment ChatGPT with machine learning to, quote, improve future responses. Now, let me lead you through a set of questions that I formulated for ChatGPT, which demonstrates conclusively that even AI and its developers want the people to understand that while those in power give lip service to it, the Constitution is absolutely and demonstrably not the supreme law of the land, at least in the minds of the powers that shouldn't be. My question was regarding Pennsylvania versus Mims, and I started off, why was Harry Mims pulled over? ChatGPT responds, Harry Mims was pulled over for a minor traffic violation, specifically for driving with an expired license plate. Ooh, hardened criminal here. The incident occurred in 1973 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Mims' vehicle was stopped by two police officers, and during the stop, they noticed a suspicious bulge in his clothing. This led the officers to suspect that Mims might be armed. Mims was ordered out of his car, and during the pat-down search, the officers discovered a weapon. Mims was subsequently arrested for carrying a concealed weapon without a license. By the way, he was later charged and convicted for carrying a concealed weapon. He had a .38, and his buddy in the passenger side had a .32. What a lot of people don't realize is that that conviction was reversed by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on March 31st, 1975, which ruled that the evidence should have been suppressed as the police violated Mims' Fourth Amendment rights against unlawful search and seizure. But the United States Supreme Court, in turn, reversed the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision. They upheld the original conviction on the grounds that no violation of the Fourth Amendment had occurred. So what actually happened was that Mims got his Fourth Amendment rights violated and his Second Amendment rights violated, and the Supreme Court was just fine with that. The case of Pennsylvania versus Mims reached the United States Supreme Court in 1977. The court's decision in this case established the legal precedent that police officers have the authority to order drivers and passengers out of their vehicles during a lawful traffic stop, even if they don't have any specific suspicion of wrongdoing. This ruling was based on the consideration of officer safety and the need to prevent potentially dangerous situations during traffic stops. You want a translation on that? Officer safety trumps constitutionally protected rights and therefore trumps the supreme law of the land. Which naturally led to my next question: what is the supreme law of the land in America? To which ChatGPT responds, the supreme law of the land in America is the United States Constitution. It is the highest legal authority in the country and serves as the foundation for the entire legal system. All other laws, including federal and state laws, must conform to the principles and provisions outlined in the Constitution. Additionally, the Constitution establishes the structure of the federal government, enumerates the powers of the branches of government, protects individual rights, and outlines the relationship between the federal government and the states. Any law or action that conflicts with the Constitution can be declared unconstitutional and therefore invalid by the courts. Sounds pretty good, right? I reply, isn't the Second Amendment part of the supreme law of the land? ChatGPT says, yes, you are correct. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution is indeed a part of the supreme law of the land in America. It is one of the amendments in the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The Second Amendment protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It states, and they go on to quote it, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. As part of the Constitution, the Second Amendment holds significant legal weight and is subject to interpretation by the courts. Oh, really? So if the supreme law of the land holds significant legal weight, but it is subject to the interpretation by the courts, then the supreme law of the land is the interpretation by the courts, not the Constitution itself. So the AI right here just showed that they are willing to engage in hypocrisy and contradiction. It has been the subject of much debate and legal analysis over the years regarding the scope of the right to bear arms and the extent to which it may be regulated by government authorities. How about infringed upon? Let's use that synonym. To which I said, if the Second Amendment is part of the supreme law of the land, how is Harry Mims rightly, quote, in ChatGPT's words, arrested for carrying a concealed weapon without a license? They say, you're correct that the Second Amendment is part of the supreme law of the land in the United States, and it protects the right of the people to keep and bear arms. However, like other rights protected by the Constitution, the right to bear arms is not absolute and may be subject to certain limitations and regulations imposed by law. In other words, shall be infringed. In the case of Harry Mims, while he may have had the right to possess the firearm under the Second Amendment, there were other laws and regulations in place that govern how and where the firearm could be carried and used. In many jurisdictions, carrying a concealed weapon without a proper license or permit is illegal. In other words, infringements are legal. Infringements violate the Constitution, and infringements are the supreme law of the land. They say regardless of whether the person has the right to possess the firearm. In other words, that right that you got is not unalienable in the eyes of people who have power. In Mims' case, he was pulled over for a traffic violation, and during the course of the stop, the police officers observed a suspicious bulge in his clothing, leading them to suspect that he might be carrying a concealed weapon. He might be operating under his rights as outlined in the Second Amendment. Upon conducting a pat-down search, the officers discovered the firearm, which led to Mims' arrest for carrying a concealed weapon without a license. This arrest was based on the applicable laws and regulations regarding firearms possession and concealed carry in the jurisdiction where the incident occurred. While the Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms, it does not necessarily prevent governments from enacting reasonable regulations. Translation on that: it does not necessarily prevent the government from infringing on your unalienable rights to keep and bear arms. Guess what? That's exactly what the Second Amendment does. It restrains the government from violating your rights. So I say, if that right, quote, shall not be infringed as per the supreme law of the land, and other laws can limit or infringe on that right through regulations imposed by law, then your claim that the Constitution is supreme is a false claim. They say, I understand your concern, and it's an important aspect of constitutional interpretation that has been the subject of much debate and legal analysis. The language of the Second Amendment stating that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is indeed absolute on its face. And guess what? It absolutely is. But then they add in, however, the Supreme Court and lower courts have recognized that this right, like other constitutional rights, is not without limitations. In other words, we can infringe upon that which shall not be infringed. Throughout U.S. legal history, the courts have recognized that certain regulations on the right to bear arms can be permissible under the Constitution. Really? Where? For example, laws regulating the possession and carrying of firearms in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings, laws prohibiting certain categories of individuals, such as convicted felons or the mentally ill, from possessing firearms, the laws requiring permits or licenses for carrying concealed weapons have been upheld as constitutional, even though they are clearly not and are clearly an infringement on unalienable rights. Then they say the interpretation and application of the constitutional rights, including the Second Amendment, involve a balancing of individual rights with the government's interest in promoting public safety and preventing crime. So the world's largest, most notorious crime ring is interested in your public safety and preventing crime. It's a laugh. It's a joke. This balancing often leads to the recognition that while the right to bear arms is protected, it is not immune from reasonable regulations, which means it's not protected. In summary, while the Second Amendment is indeed part of the supreme law of the land, it does not confer an absolute and unrestricted right to bear arms. And I'm going to deal with that in my next question. Instead, it is subject. In other words, underneath, not supreme over, it is subject. The Constitution and the Second Amendment is subject to limitations, that's infringements, and regulations, that's infringements, that are consistent with the Constitution and have been recognized as such by the tyrannical courts. This recognition does not diminish the supremacy of the Constitution. It absolutely does. They're trying to tell you that something that is actually is not. They're trying to tell you that these limitations and regulations are not infringements when they absolutely are, but rather reflects the complex and nuanced nature of constitutional law. You don't see my next question here because my comment and question may have violated their usage policies, but I say the Constitution does not grant or confer rights, but rather recognizes and protects existing rights that we all already have by birth. They're unalienable rights, and they cannot be infringed upon. And I also said that if other laws can supersede the supreme law of the land, and ChatGPT clearly confirmed that the Constitution is supreme, then ChatGPT has absolutely stripped all meaning from the term supreme and is now engaged in a cunning game of deception and doublespeak. And that's where I said you are being completely dishonest. ChatGPT responds, I apologize if my previous responses were not satisfactory. You're correct that the Constitution does not grant rights, but rather recognizes and protects pre-existing rights. The term supreme law of the land is used to emphasize the constitutional principles that federal law, including the Constitution itself, takes precedent over other laws and governmental actions. Regarding the Second Amendment and the issue of firearms regulations, the interpretation and application of constitutional rights involves complex legal considerations, including balancing individual rights with societal interests. Courts have recognized that certain regulations on the right to bear arms are consistent with the Constitution. In other words, the courts have recognized that certain infringements on the right to bear arms, which shall not be infringed, are consistent with the Constitution that says you shouldn't do the very thing that you just got done doing. while also affirming the fundamental nature of the right itself. This is just bogus. It's doublespeak. It's deceptive. And frankly, it's evil because you're talking about a group of men, and now a group of men and women in black robes who have the authority to take your rights away in violation of the Constitution that they say that they're there to protect and uphold. Ultimately, constitutional law is subject to interpretation. So if it is subject to interpretation, it cannot, in any sense of the word, be considered supreme. Interpretation is supreme. So the supreme law of the land, according to this AI and according to a lot of people, is not the Constitution, but the black robe tyrant's interpretation of the Constitution. Ultimately, constitutional law is subject to interpretation and evolves through judicial decisions, legal scholarship, and societal developments. The term supreme law of the land, so that means you can get your rights taken away if the society develops in a certain way. The term supreme law of the land is a recognition of the foundational importance of the Constitution that we can just ignore within the legal framework of the United States. If you have further questions or concerns, please feel free to let me know. To which I would say, you know what? It's hard to have a conversation with a program or a person that has been designed to be dishonest. Leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police in the comment section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know. Watch some of my older videos. I've got a couple videos out here about AI, and there's a bunch of viral videos that you probably haven't seen and you might be able to benefit from. If you want to support the channel further, grab a shirt, become a channel member, but more importantly, know what your rights are, know what the truth is, and walk in that truth. Truth is the new hate speech. Truth is treason in the empire of lies, and truth will always be the first casualty in any war, including this information war. I will see you in the next video.